He was exactly where he was supposed to be. At the time he was supposed to be there. Nothing about that day felt wrong. He didn't cancel plans, didn't change his routine, didn't warn anyone. He left the house the same way he always did, quietly, without thinking. The door locked behind him automatically. Inside, nothing was left unfinished. No lights on, no signs of urgency. Everything suggested he would be back later that day. People who knew him described him as responsible, careful, predictable. The kind of person who followed rules. The kind of person who didn't take risks. He had lived his life that way for years. Same job, same commute, same schedule. He didn't improvise. He didn't experiment. He trusted systems. If something was official, he believed it worked. If someone was in charge, he assumed they knew what they were doing. That belief shaped everything. The place he went that day wasn't dangerous. At least, it wasn't supposed to be. People went there all the time, came back without incident. There were cameras. There were procedures. There were people whose job it was to pay attention. That knowledge made everyone relax. It made them stop noticing details. He arrived on time, signed in, followed instructions. Nothing unusual happened. Witnesses would later say the same thing. He looked calm, focused, normal. There was no argument, no raised voices, no visible conflict, just a normal sequence of events. That was what made everything that followed so difficult to understand. Because when something goes wrong in a place designed to be safe, the first instinct isn't fear, it's denial. People assume there must be an explanation, a delay, a misunderstanding. Someone probably made a mistake. Someone else would notice. Hours passed before anyone realized he was missing. Not because they didn't care, but because the environment trained them not to worry. By the time questions were asked, the timeline was already broken, and the truth had started to slip away. At first, no one thought anything was wrong. He was supposed to be there for several hours. That was normal. People came and went. Schedules overlapped. Responsibility was spread thin. If someone didn't see him, it didn't mean he wasn't there. It just meant they hadn't crossed paths yet. That assumption lasted longer than it should have. When his name didn't appear on the final checklist, it was treated as a paperwork issue. A missing signature. A delayed update. Nothing urgent. Someone said they would look into it. Someone else said it could wait until the next shift. Systems are good at one thing, making people believe someone else is paying attention. By the time the discrepancy was noticed again, hours had passed. The building was quieter now. Fewer people, fewer witnesses. A supervisor checked the logs. Everything looked complete. Almost. There was a gap. Small. Easy to miss. A timestamp that didn't align. At first, it didn't mean anything. It was written off as a glitch. Technology fails sometimes. That explanation was easier than asking harder questions. When they finally went to look for him, they didn't expect to find nothing. They checked the places he should have been. The rooms assigned to him, empty. They checked again. Slower this time. Still nothing. That was when the mood shifted. Not to panic. Not yet. To confusion. People began asking the same question quietly. Where did he go? Security footage was pulled. Not immediately. There was no alarm forcing the issue. They reviewed the cameras from the main areas first. Entrances. Exits. He was seen arriving. That much was clear. After that, the footage became harder to follow. Angles overlapped. Blind spots appeared. Some cameras recorded. Others froze 4 minutes at a time. No one noticed when it happened, because no one was looking yet. By the time they realized something was truly wrong, they were no longer trying to prevent something. They were trying to reconstruct it. And reconstruction always comes too late. When the situation was finally reported as a disappearance, the language still softened it. Unaccounted for. Possibly misplaced. Those words delayed urgency. Search efforts began quietly, not as an emergency, as a verification. They checked schedules again, reread procedures. Someone must have missed something. That belief shaped the first hours. Security reviewed footage more carefully this time, frame by frame. They saw him enter areas he was authorized to access, places where people assumed oversight existed. He followed the path he was given, stopped where he was told to stop. There was no deviation. At one point, he paused, looked around, not nervously, not suspiciously, just waiting. The footage ended there. The next camera should have picked him up. It didn't. They checked the system logs. That camera hadn't recorded for weeks. Maintenance had been scheduled, then postponed, then forgotten. No one had noticed because nothing had gone wrong before. They searched the physical space, every room, every corridor. Nothing. No signs of struggle. No damaged equipment. No indication that someone else had been there. The environment looked exactly as it should, which made the absence harder to accept. People don't disappear from secure places. At least, that's what everyone believed. When outside authorities were contacted, they asked the same questions. When was he last seen? Who was responsible at that moment? The answers were unclear. Responsibility had been divided among shifts, oversight shared across departments. No single person had been watching. That diffusion mattered, because when everyone is responsible, no one truly is. The search widened. They reviewed exits again. None showed him leaving. No alarms had been triggered. No badges flagged. The system reported nothing unusual, and that was the problem. The system wasn't designed to detect absence, only breaches. By the end of the day, the assumption that he would simply turn up had faded. Silence replaced it. A silence heavy enough to change how people spoke. Whispers replaced normal conversation, because now the question wasn't where he went. It was how someone could vanish from a place designed to keep track of everyone inside it. As the hours turned into a full day, the language around the situation changed. It was no longer a delay, no longer a mistake. It was an incident. External investigators arrived with fresh questions. Questions that the system itself couldn't answer. They wanted names, times, clear responsibility. What they found instead were procedures, checklists, logs filled out correctly, but without meaning. Every step had been followed, on paper. In reality, the system relied on assumption more than confirmation. They traced his movements again, from arrival to the last recorded frame. The gap remained, a space in time no one could account for. Search teams expanded their efforts beyond the facility. Nearby areas, routes he could have taken. Nothing turned up. The idea that he might have left unnoticed was considered, then dismissed. There were too many layers of security, too many barriers. At least, that's what the design promised. But design doesn't prevent human error. Investigators focused on the area where the footage ended. A narrow corridor, poor lighting. It was meant to be temporary access only. A place people passed through, not stayed in. They found signs of neglect, equipment left unchecked, doors that didn't always close properly. Small things. The kind of things no one reports, because they don't seem dangerous, until they are. Witnesses were interviewed again, this time more carefully. Details that seemed irrelevant before were examined closely now. Someone remembered hearing a noise. Not loud, not alarming, just different. Another recalled a door being open when it shouldn't have been. No one connected these details at the time. They didn't seem important. That was the pattern. Nothing seemed important until it was too late. The longer the investigation went on, the clearer it became that no single failure caused what happened. It was a sequence, a chain of small oversights, assumptions layered on top of each other, each one harmless on its own, together, catastrophic. As days passed, the focus shifted from finding him to understanding how he could be lost in the first place. Investigators stopped asking where he went and started asking how the system failed to notice. Every department defended its role. Every log showed compliance. No one had broken the rules. They had simply followed them too loosely. Interviews became repetitive. The same answers. The same phrases. I assumed someone else was watching. I thought the system would flag it. It wasn't my responsibility at that moment. Those sentences appeared again and again. The facility had been designed to prevent intrusion, not disappearance. It tracked access. It monitored exits. But it didn't verify presence. If someone entered and never left, the system didn't question it. That gap had never mattered before. Until it did. Search teams revisited every overlooked space. Storage rooms. Maintenance areas. Places no one thought to check at first. Because nothing ever happened there. They found signs of wear. Neglect. Nothing dramatic. Nothing criminal. Just evidence of time and inattention. The theory that he had suffered an accident was considered quietly, then more seriously, but without physical evidence. It remained only a possibility. Families want certainty, not possibilities. Public attention grew slowly. Confused. The story didn't fit familiar narratives. There was no suspect, no clear act of violence, just a person who had vanished while doing exactly what he was supposed to do. That detail unsettled people more than anything else. If it could happen to someone following the rules, it could happen to anyone. Officials were careful with their statements. Language softened again. Ongoing review. Active investigation. Behind closed doors, confidence eroded. The system had been trusted for years. Now, that trust felt fragile. Not because of one failure, but because of how many small failures had been ignored. The absence of answers became its own presence. It changed how people looked at procedures, at checklists, at assumptions they had never questioned before. In the end, there was no moment of revelation, no discovery that tied everything together. There was only an understanding that settled slowly. He had done nothing wrong. He followed instructions, trusted procedures, assumed someone was watching, just like everyone else did. The investigation concluded without resolution. No definitive cause. No single point of failure. The report listed contributing factors, environmental conditions, maintenance delays, human oversight. Nothing criminal, nothing intentional, which somehow made it worse, because it meant there was no one to blame. The facility made changes afterward, updated protocols, added redundancies. New systems were installed to track presence, not just access. Training emphasized accountability, clear responsibility, all the things that came too late. The place continued operating. People still arrived every day, still signed in. Most of them never knew what had happened there. Those who did couldn't stop thinking about it, about how easily routine turns into assumption, how safety becomes something people believe in, rather than verify. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't careless. He trusted the environment he was in, and the environment failed him quietly. There was no violence, no confrontation, just a series of moments where no one noticed that someone was missing. That absence didn't trigger alarms, didn't break systems. It simply went unnoticed long enough to become permanent. People like to believe that following rules keeps them safe. Most of the time, it does. But rules don't protect you. When everyone assumes someone else is paying attention, he didn't disappear because he took a risk. He disappeared because he didn't. And by the time anyone realized that safety had turned into silence, there was nothing left to find.